Also got Stuart Kistruck here attending on behalf of Ellie Burrows from Network Rail, and Councillor Simon Curry is attending today on behalf of Vince Maple from Medway. So welcome to you all. And we just need to record apologies from Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson from Portsmouth, Vince Maple from Medway, Ellie Burrows, Network Rail, and Daniel Riz is also sending his apologies. So we come to agenda item 2, which is the minutes from the previous meeting. They've been circulated, and thanks again to all of you who were able to make the extraordinary board members meeting. The business plan was submitted to DFT on the 22nd of December. And so with that, can I seek approval from members for the minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 18th of December?
Approved.
Approved. All right with me.
Thank you very much. And so following today, they will be published on the TFSE website. 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that Partnership Board members wish to make of any interest that they need to declare in relation to the agenda? None? Okay. So we come to agenda item 4, which is the statements from the public. And today, please, I will report that we have no statements. I won't say whether I'm pleased or not, but thank you very much. We don't have any statements today. So that brings us to agenda item 5, which is a key agenda item this afternoon. And I can ask Nick Harris, Chief Executive of National Highways, to introduce himself a bit more if he needs. But Nick is responsible for the operational leadership of National Highways, including the day-to-day operations of their network, customer service and maintenance services, and the company's 5-year capital maintenance and revenue programme. So, Nick, thank you very much for making time to join us today. And can I hand over to you to give us an update on the RIS3 programme and anything else that you want to inform us on? Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. So I just, how long have I got so I sort of can judge how long to go on for? Or you're on mute, Keith.
Apart from Jeff telling me to get this through on time, there is no time limit. Nick, listen, we don't have the opportunity to have you here for long or often, so please take as much time as you need.
I will try and entertain you for an appropriate length of time. And I mean, it's kind of timely. I appeared in front of the Transport Select Committee last week, so I'll touch on some of the things that I shared with them last week, but that was an hour and a half, so I'll cut it a bit. I'll be a bit more concise than that. But yeah, no, thank you very much, and again for the invitation. I'm going to give a bit of an update on how RIS2 is going and talk about the future, RIS3, and I mean, if you want to do questions or anything at the end, then perfect. So I've now been the CEO of National Highways for 3 years, and it's having said that, you sort of go, wow, that's 3 years. It's gone very rapidly, mainly because there's just so much that we're doing, and RIS2 has been challenging. We've had inflation, which we're all wrestling with, which has had an impact not only on this road period, but is, of course, having impact on the affordability of things going forwards. We've got an ever-aging set of assets to look after. Most of the bridges and roads that form the strategic road network, a lot of them were built in the 1960s and 70s when, well, I wasn't driving around, but for those that might have been, we were in things like Ford Cortinas and Hillman Minxes. So the loadings on our roads were significantly different to what we're seeing today. And it's through a lot of great asset management and looking after those assets that we have, and of course enhancing the network that we're meeting the demands that are placed upon the roads that we're looking after. So how are we doing so far in RIS2? So the second of 2 5-year periods, and I think one thing is that it's if you like, confirming that this 5-year cycle is the right way to look after strategic assets. It enables us to plan with some stability. And you'll have seen that as we've got ready for the next road period, the third road period. We've published Connecting the Country, so that's our view out to 2050. The consultation documents that went out earlier in the year, our route strategies, and all of it is really enabled by having this 5-year cycle that permits a much more strategic, longer-term view of how we're looking after developing and maintaining the roads that we have in our care. So in general, it's working well. We're doing really well on things like our maintenance and renewal program. They're on target to deliver what we planned for this period, despite the challenges of inflation, which I managed earlier. What we have found challenging is the getting planning for some of our largest projects. So we, as an organisation, as we went through the first road period into the second, we got 14 large projects through the development consent order successfully, with no legal challenge. And then things rapidly changed in about year 2 of this current road period. And we've seen most of the larger projects, the DCO decision being challenged. Now, all of those challenges so far, we have won successfully, apart from one, which was the the A303, which was overturned on some important technicalities. It's since been resubmitted and consented, but of course is having a legal challenge. So ultimately, we're being successful. That's because of the good work that is going into the material that we put into the development consent order process, but it remains a challenge. So that's affected delivery in this road period. And then the other challenge, I suppose, in 2 ways was, one, we had, of course, the COVID pandemic, which we successfully continue to deliver through. But as we've seen traffic levels come back, and traffic levels are now higher than we went into the pandemic, but the mix is different. So we're seeing more trucks, a lot more vans relatively, and slightly lower levels of private cars. And that means it's affecting things like we measure average delay across the network. Well, because vans and lorries go slower than cars, that's affecting that metric. And of course, there's a changing pattern of vehicle usage. We're also seeing, because we're not seeing the peak so much in the morning and the evening, that's spreading traffic out during the day more in general across the network, and average speeds are going up. So we're seeing safety affected. So delivering on our target to halve or a 50% reduction on killed and seriously injured incidents in this road period is looking very challenging towards the end of this road period, and we're doing additional activity to improve that. The environment, of course, has quite rightly become more important, and we're making really good progress on delivering biodiversity. So by the end of this road period, we will have no net loss in biodiversity. We're working, I'm going to have to move because the lights have gone off in this meeting room. There we go. And I'm obviously not moving enough. And we're making progress on air quality, mainly as a result of the shift in vehicle fleets and more folk buying either cleaner diesel and petrol cars, and of course the shift to electric vehicles. And we're making progress on discharges to watercourses and decarbonisation. And then I was, in terms of performance, I was just going to mention, we continue to support active travel. And in fact, I think we're the largest promoter, developer of cycleways, cycle schemes. And there's a great one that runs alongside the A27 for, I think, about 7 miles, which is one of many that we've developed. So quick trot through RIS2 going okay. There's some challenges, but I mean, a good thing, and I was just going to refer to another document you can have a look at, is the ORR's Office of Rail and Roads annual assessment that was published last summer, which kind of reflects, I think, much of what I've just said. Looking to the future. So what's the next 5 years look like? Well, as I'm telling everyone in the company, it's evolution, not revolution. So it's, we're 9 years old. It's continued development of us. We're looking at focusing a bit more on the maintenance and renewal of our existing assets. They're getting older, so there will be more funding for that. And of course, we're looking at a growing class of assets, which is technology, which is increasingly to be found across our network, providing all kinds of capacity, safety, support, as well as improving data and information available to all of us to make decisions on our journeys. So that is a growing asset that needs more and more focus, and we'll be including that into RIS3. In terms of process, I'm touching wood here, but we should have the draft RIS published in February. So there's currently, it's been going through departmental write round. So I'm feeling reasonably optimistic that it will be published next month. And then, of course, we share the draft business plan with the Office of Rail and Roads, which should then result in to do their efficiency and deliverability review. And we have a conversation about targets. And by summer, that should be complete, with the hope that the RIS will be signed off in September, by September, hopefully ahead of a general election, which may be in the autumn, of course. So we'll have to wait to see the publication of the RIS, but I mean, I can share a few bits. Of course, the ongoing development of the Lower Thames Crossing is in there, the Stonehenge A303, and of course, all of the projects that that will have started before the end of this road period. So that's a quick kind of state of the nation, look ahead. But I should also mention before I end that we're making good progress on our on digital roads, and in particular focused on our customer journeys. So how we now are increasingly looking at our role as a customer service provider and looking from all of the road users, customers, communities alongside our networks inwards, rather than looking at it from the engineering and assets outwards. But I'll stop at that point.
Thank you, Nick. And if you're happy for a few questions, I know there are a couple at least. If I can just start, I mean, one of the big issues that we have highlighted is the pausing of work on the A27 Arundel and whatever. We really do think that once that comes out of the scheme and then you pick it up again, there's an enormous waste of money and work that's gone into that will be absolutely just wasted. I don't know if Joy is there, whether she wants to add anything from West Sussex perspective, but from our perspective generally, we can understand that you can't do everything at once, but actually to stop the planning to get this through to outline business case seems totally devoid of any sense to us. So I don't know, Joy, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, thank you very much, East Sussex, for thinking of us. Especially since you've got your wonderful A27 section and cycle routes. Yeah, I mean, you summed it up really. It's very much a stop and start, and I suppose that's the frustration. We go so far. And then it stops, and when will it start again? I suppose those are the questions that we have, and when will it start again? And I suppose the question is, when some of these stop, is it because we've stopped because we think it's not right route, or because it needs to change, or because in fact it's just lost out in terms of business case compared to the other items? It's then understanding what, so you can explain to your residents.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to come back on that one? Then I'll go to David. Thank you.
Of course, no, absolutely. And I understand. I mean, it is important to be able to share the reasons for things, and that's it's a complex challenge for us when we're going into the RIS3 conversation, as well as the particular moment in time we find ourselves at the moment. The clarity I'm hoping will come out of the conversations around RIS3, and of course, and I'm talking in general now, not specifically about the scheme. We have to balance things at a portfolio level, and there is a limited amount of money that's available. So having a deliverable solution that's affordable, that's value for money, having considered not just the economic case, but also environmental, strategic and community issues matters. So as we, and it won't become clear as the draft RIS is published, but as the RIS is developed and the delivery plan is agreed, then we will be able to provide much more information on the decisions that will have, by that point, have been made for RIS3. But it will probably come down to we can't do everything.
Okay, thank you. Rupert, is yours connected to that, or shall I wait and go to David first?
It is connected, Keith. Thank you. I mean, I'm sort of reiterating things that Nick and I have had conversations about in the past, but that M27, A27, A259 corridor is the only orbital route south of the M25, and is pretty fundamental for businesses and residents getting across the south coast. And I think that whole corridor has had a history over the last 25 years of stop start. And I really think the challenge for us is, how do you give confidence to businesses who use that corridor? How do you give confidence to residents? How do you deal with some of the issues where you're effectively splitting communities as a result of a unsatisfactory trunk road going through their community? And when you sort of add all those things up, delays to the DCO process around the A27 at Arundel start to erode that confidence at a time when we need it most. And Councillor Glazier has said within our business plan that now is not the time to step back on funding for major infrastructure. It is one of the things that is going to help us in the longer term. And I know we've rehearsed these conversations many times, Nick, but it's important to set that out again.
Absolutely, and I recognise very much the importance of east-west connectivity. That of course is not how the roads have developed, but it's increasingly important. Not only in the south there, but we're seeing it in the Midlands and in the north. And the challenges, as you know, are not small for the A27, squeezed between the sea and areas of outstanding natural beauty, the national park, etc. It is incredibly difficult, but nevertheless, they're projects that are in the pipeline. About when they will go ahead is going to be a matter of having affordable schemes, and around Arundel it is very challenging. And as I said, the availability of funding in the next, well, not only in the next road period, but the following one. So we no doubt will be talking more about it, but I absolutely recognise the concern for both clarity and progress on that and other schemes.
Thanks for that, Nick. David, Councillor Roby.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm David Roby. I'm the Deputy Cabinet Member for Highways at KCC. Thank you for your talk, Nick. Very interesting. Two questions for you, one specific and one more general. The A229 Bluebell Hill Improvement Scheme is very important for Kent and very important within the context of the developments surrounding the Lower Thames crossing. And it's a £10 million scheme, and we're 3.5 million short of it from the DFTs, and we have to find that, and we're in a difficult position like many councils are. Kent County Council, can you help us with the money? And also, can you help us perhaps even more immediately with the £300,000 we need, a trivial sum of money really, to develop the outline business case for the scheme, which is sound. We've got everything lined up, we don't just have the cash. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, there was a top man in National Highways. You know a lot more about roads than I do, but I sat through a meeting the other day going through the Kent County Council's proposals for submitting in the Local Transport Plan 5, our LTP 5. And in that, we looked at all of the major road schemes in Kent that are proposed, including the Lower Thames Crossing, whether they're our schemes or other people's schemes. And the thing that really struck me is how long some of these things have been going on, how long it takes to get anything done at all. In some cases, even quite small schemes. And I wondered what you would do if you had a magic wand. What would you do? What could be done to make things happen faster, irrespective of whose schemes they are? You must have a view on it. Thank you.
Yes, no. Thank you for the magic wand. And it's a great question. So I'll come back to that. I mean, the specifics of the A229 that's being funded by the major roads funding, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
And then that's the reason there needs to be a contribution to get it to OBC. Okay. We're very supportive. I mean, it's a good scheme, and an important piece of connectivity. And I think there have been conversations in the past about whether it should be trunked or not. Yeah. And I think I suppose the question is. We don't want to do something that would slow down the delivery of it, because it is a good scheme. What I can do is don't know perhaps enough about it. I'll take that away, and I am interested in talking to the DFT about it to see if there's anything that's possible there. I don't know off the top of my head, but I will take that away.
Thank you.
But coming to your magic wand, I mean, it is an interesting one. Significant schemes normally have a lifespan of 12 to 15 years. Some of them have been around a lot longer than that, though, of course. If I think about the Stonehenge 303, the tunnel, this is the third time there's been a serious attempt to build it in the last 40 years, probably, if not more. So they have a habit of being there a long time. I go back to my comments earlier that the 5-year funding of us is beginning to redress that, and we're beginning to get greater stability of the forward strategic view of what needs doing, and the contribution from yourselves and the other subnational transport bodies is incredibly important in that, because what matters is taking it away from the cyclical decision of ministers, and giving a much stronger strategic prioritization and context. There'll always be sort of movements around balancing the north, the south, other economic goals that the country may have. But by having a much clearer pipeline that is then funded, we should bring a much better process. And then I think touching on the planning, I'm okay. I think that the development consent order process is fine. It has time. It has a timetable. It has clarity. Maybe it produces an awful lot of material, which that could be improved. But it's the legal challenges that come after. Now, of course, legal challenge is appropriate. We live in a democracy, but there should be a better balance, I think, of consequence. It is too easy to bring a question of judicial review for very little financial impact that can cost all of us not only time lost, but millions and millions of pounds. So I think that's one area that I'm talking about. The other is schemes that we do under the Highways Act. We've proposed a whole series of improvements that could make that a better process as well. But I think the key is really good planning together, so that the more we build a consensus over what we want into the future, then the more chance we have of progressing things, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Rupert, is that a final on that one, or shall I go to Councillor?
Well, Keith, I think this is the point that Councillor Raby raises is as relevant to a number of authorities, in that the costs of getting from SOBC to OBC are becoming quite challenging at a time when local transport authorities are facing broader pressures around SEND in children's or homeschool transport or adult social care. And they have to make some really difficult decisions around prioritisation. And it means schemes such as the A229, which we're all behind and, is the right outcome become increasingly challenged for LTAs. And I wonder whether there is some merit in us as an STB convening the DfT and National Highways to have a broader conversation about these sorts of schemes that, you know, have a relationship between the SRN to try and navigate a way forward. I mean, I don't think there's going to be an easy answer because there isn't suddenly a pot of money available. But, you know, it then becomes a shared endeavour on how we get best outcome for businesses and residents and communities.
Although just coming in there, I think, no, it's interesting what you say there, because we have every 6 months a portfolio risk review with DfT. So there's there's HS2 and Network Rail and of course all of the local authorities represented by just one bit of DfT. But what struck me is there's quite a lot of pots of money available, and there is an argument for coordinating it a bit better. And we because yes, there is overall shortage of money, but in some senses not. So I think that could be an interesting conversation.
We'll see what we can go. Thank you for being patient, Simon. Councillor Curry, thank you.
No, that's fine. And thanks very much. It's my first meeting time at this meeting, so it's nice to meet you all. I'm portfolio holder for Medway Council for strategic regeneration, one of the things, including highways and transport. And really, I mean, the question is probably leading on from your previous question when you talk about Bluebell Hill, about the A2 M1 junction and how that's operating, and the other junctions to the south of Medway as well. I mean, our local plan is emerging now, and DLAC are giving us figures of in excess of 28,000 houses, along with Maidstone, who are building similar numbers, and Gravesham and Swale as well. And we're already told that junction is over capacity or at capacity, over capacity. And we're hearing also that we can't go ahead with some, we've got holding objections to some develops within Medway based upon the road network. So just your thoughts really around what can be done about that, but also this sort of squaring the circle between DLUC and DfT, because we're getting two messages. One is that the roads aren't working, and the other one is that we have to build more. We have to do a lot more development. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So is that the, I'm just trying to think of, is that the Brenley Corner and A2? No,
this is up near, just to the sort of southeast of Gravesend as you come into Medway and Strood and there. Yeah, no, got it now, yeah. Always challenging to hold the whole network in my in my head, but yeah, I mean it's not an unusual conversation we have, which is how you square what you need to put in the local plan. Of course, you want to support economic growth and housing versus, and it's often a timing issue. What might be in RIS 3, for example, or later, and it is a challenge. And I think what can I say? That's the local plans will need to be developed. Yes, with the knowledge of the schemes that are confirmed and going ahead. Ones that aren't, then that's not possible. Other mitigations will have to be put in. What I do find really interesting is, of course, the Department for Transport is funded to fund us from a transport point of view. And it strikes me that more coordination with ELUX and others, because there are other drivers, is a good idea. And certainly, we're interested in engaging more in that, because if you look at the area you've just described, it's exactly the same as you look in the eastern region around sort of Peterborough and through to Cambridge. It's housing that is driving a lot of the development there. And it does call for a bit more joined up thinking, I think.
Thank you for that. There appears to be no more hands up. So can I thank you? And I think, from our perspective as a subnational transport board, we actually really do value the working relationships that are developing and have developed. We've come a long way in the 5 years since we started, and to have you attend and give us your thoughts is very, very appreciated. So thank you very much for that.
No, thank you. And yeah, I mean, the working relationship with yourself and the other subnational transport bodies is really important to us as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the strategic prioritisation tool. And Sarah, I think you're going to introduce, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Hosier, and afternoon, everybody. So the purpose of this item is to provide the board with an update on the development of a strategic prioritisation framework and tool that will support delivery of the strategic investment plan. I think it's worth saying straight up that this is one of the key roles for for STBs. The guidance we receive from DFT particularly directs us to have a methodology by which we can give prioritisation information to the Secretary of State to help on that. I think for us as an STB, we were a bit ahead of the curve. We've actually started working on this quite some time before the government told us to, so we are really ahead of the game here. And the board has obviously had previous updates, which I'm sure you will recall, both on the framework for decision making and on the methodology for prioritisation. At the last meeting, the board agreed that framework and methodology, and they also agreed for a tool to be developed that will allow that methodology to be employed. That tool has been created and is now finished. It was developed very much in conjunction with all the local transport authorities in our patch. Transport Strategy Working Group and Senior Officer Group both saw sample outputs as we went through the process. They had the opportunity to feedback, and we took on board that feedback and changed the tool as it was developed. So the presentation today describes how the tool actually works, and then also how it will be used in any prioritisation that we are asked to do. I think it's really important to remember as you look at the presentation that the tool is there to provide an evidence-based draft priority list for your consideration. It doesn't make the decision for you. That decision very much rests with the board and stays that way, which is why there's a process attached to the end of it. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Stephen Bishop from Steer, who will take you through how the tool has been developed and how it works, and then you'll come back to me for some information on the governance process that sits alongside it. Stephen.
Thank you, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. Could I have the next slide, please? And the next one again, please. So 3 topics to cover, building on Sarah's introduction, a bit more on the background to the framework and the tool that supports it, then moving on to how the tool operates, and then I'll pass back to Sarah, who'll look at the governance and how the framework is applied with decision making. Next slide, please. And one more, please. So Sarah's mentioned there is an imperative from the Department for Transport that all subnational transport bodies have a means of prioritising investment to provide advice to ministers. So this obviously strongly aligns with that. In development of the framework and the tool, we realise there's more than one area of prioritisation. So the first is around focusing limited revenue funding for studies. That's for early stage business case development, for example, feasibility studies and strategic outline business cases. The next is as schemes move into a development phase, things like outline business cases and the like, and we just had some questions from various attendees to Nick there. And then finally, the large amounts of capital funding required to deliver interventions. So as schemes move through different phases of development, we might want to prioritise in different ways. And as Sarah mentioned, we wouldn't have been able to do this without the engagement of yourselves as well as Senior Officer Group and the Working Group. Next slide, please. We've passed through these 4 stages now of development. We spent quite a long time on the first stage, really agreeing and understanding the principles that should underline prioritisation. I think most of us will have been through similar exercises and know that it can be quite contentious to prioritise limited funding across multiple wants and needs. We then confirmed the approach for prioritisation and developed the tool that supports it. And we are today seeking the approval on that final step. Next slide, please. The principles that we agreed are shown here. The first is that it must be evidenced. We must make best use of the existing evidence. And for many of the interventions in the strategic implementation plan that we're seeking to deliver, the consistent evidence base comes from the area studies programme that informed the SIP. including a multi-criteria assessment framework, as well as a delivery action plan that provides the more logistical considerations of implementation. The second principle, I think Sarah's already mentioned this, is that it supports decisions and does not make decisions. This is not an algorithmic model that spits out an answer that we seek approval for. It is there to inform. The third consideration is that it must be resource efficient. Strategic prioritization can be an industry in its own right, and we want to be able to conduct this efficiently and reduce the costs and resource required. And that finally, it needs to help manage uncertainty. At the moment, there isn't a current call from central government to submit a prioritisation. So when we know the rules of engagement, we need to be able to respond accordingly. And similarly, perhaps as TFSE's roles and responsibilities change over time, that it can work in tandem with that. Next slide, please. The tool that supports this framework works across 4 stages. First, it organises each of the interventions from the strategic intervention plan based on their existing stage of scheme development. So those that have only been considered for the first time as part of the strategic investment plan, or perhaps have a feasibility study conducted, to those that are at later stages and nearer construction. The second is to then score them. As mentioned, this is based on the multi-criteria assessment framework and aligns to the Department for Transport's early assessment and sifting tool, EAST, and considers areas of benefit, value for money, and some deliverability and financial considerations. The third is then to evaluate that list. So based on the criteria for bidding for funding and any additional prioritisation considerations, we key these into the tool, and then we produce action plans for your review to then prioritise, and that is an iterative process ultimately, and Sarah will come on to that in a bit. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the tool here. I've already mentioned that it draws on 2 key inputs that have been brought before the board previously. The first is the delivery action plan. This effectively is monitoring of expenditure and where different schemes are in their delivery process. The second is the multi-criteria assessment framework that was moderated and reviewed by the Transport Strategy Working Group and Senior Officer Group, that contains a baseline of information that's consistent across all 250 to 300 interventions in the SIP. Next slide, please. The third input are budget constraints. So if we know the pot of funding that is available, we can then constrain the tool in that way to come up with shorter, more prioritised lists. And we allocate the cost of schemes based on a rule of thumb of 10% of the capital cost to the develop phase. So that's going from out and business case to a shovel in the ground, and then 90% into the delivery phase, the large capital cost of construction. And then finally there, but perhaps most importantly, are the filters and weightings. So again, subject to the criteria the central government sets for funding, or any other local criteria that TFSE and its partners wish to allocate, we can further filter. And in fact, we can apply weightings as well if we want to give one criteria greater priority than another, for example, decarbonisation or levelling up. If we move to the next slide, please. So based on those input parameters, the tool has a number of reasonably simple calculations that it makes, and it allocates each schemes into prioritised sets of 5-year windows and identifies whether schemes should be studied and developed and delivered, or delivered. And in some instances of smaller schemes, it could be that they pass through all 3 stages in a 5-year window. We then have a number of checks and balances. So, for example, in any draft prioritisation action plan, we can see the number of schemes by 5-year window, by local transport authority area, or by typology to ensure we're having a multimodal balance of interventions. Next slide, please. So here's just an example of the output. We've been through a number of iterations of this with yourselves, with Senior Officer Group and Transport Strategy Working Group. Broadly content that the example prioritisations, albeit this is a hypothetical one for the major road network, are returning sensible outputs. There'll always be local circumstances or local priorities that means there may be desire to move things around, and that will be obviously subject to negotiation and the provision of compelling information. But I think that fairly neatly segues onto Sarah's slides about decision making and how this approach will apply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So Stephen has just outlined the operation of the tool, how it does its calculations, but it is only a piece of evidence that supports you in your ultimate decision making around what the priorities should be. So we've developed this process here by which that tool would be employed. So the tool in this case is that green box in the second level down. We start at the top with obviously government announcing a funding round or bidding prioritisation criteria, so we understand what the rules are, what it is that we are having to prioritise against. And then, as Stephen's described, the tool can then be set up to prioritise those particular things. So those criteria are reflected in how the tool sorts through the schemes. The output is then a draft prioritised list, which we're proposing should first go to Transport Strategy Working Group for their review, then on to Senior Officer Group, and then on to the Partnership Board once Senior Officer Group are happy with it. You'll see within this there are feedback loops. So if any of those levels of the TFSE governance structure are not content with the draft priority list, there's the opportunity to feedback, consider whether those weightings and filters within the tool are correct or whether there's some tweaks that should be made, whether that is, as Steve said, to better reflect perhaps some of our local priorities versus the specific criteria that's coming out of government. Run the tool again and produce a further draft prioritised list. So there's a number of instances where, if we're not seeming to be happy with the list that's coming out, there's that opportunity to iterate it and produce a different one. At the final point at the bottom, as we said, the decision rests with the Partnership Board. So the tool informs, the Partnership Board decides, and once the list has been agreed, then it can be submitted back up to government to provide that advice to ministers that we are required to do so. Hopefully that all makes sense. That's the end of our presentation, but obviously very happy to take any questions, Chair, or we'll move on to the recommendation if that's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Again, an awful lot of work gone in by an awful lot of people, and thank everybody who's been involved. Are there any specific questions on this today? Rob, Councillor Humby.
Yeah, Keith, thank you. And like you say, a lot of work gone into it. I think there has been some previous discussions on this. Like all these sort of things, it's sometimes difficult to imagine how it sort of actually works in practice until it's probably been through a few sort of trials, if you like, schemes. It was just to make sure that there is enough flexibility within that to adapt it if it doesn't necessarily sort of produce not the answers that you want, but in terms of how it works. So I just want to make sure that there is enough flexibility within it that it can work like that. I think the governance arrangements are okay because obviously, it does say that can be reviewed by officers and sort of board members as well. So I just want to make sure that there is that flexibility that it can be adapted if it's required. I think Stephen's probably sort of covered that to a degree, but it's really just to put down a little bit of a marker that it could be.
And if I can just add to that, Rob, it's the stage at which, because it's all right waiting until you get to the end part coming to the board, but just an assurity that if there's anything controversial, then board members would know about it, because some of us don't sit on all the working groups. So if you can build that into your response as well, Sarah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Yes, and if I pick up the second point and then perhaps come to Steve just for more reassurance around how the tool works. But yes, absolutely. The checks are on. We don't want anything coming to the board, completely uncited. The whole sort of thought about going through the governance process is that it is signed off at all levels, and obviously your senior officers brief you before you come. So we would trust that the senior officers would know and would feed back to us prior to anything coming to the board. So those checks are there, and obviously the loops to feedback to iterate and review the filters and weightings are there as well. But perhaps, Stephen, if I can come to you, just a little bit more reassurance about how we can turn different criteria up or down in the tool?
Thanks, Sarah. There's a huge level of flexibility in the tool as to what criteria are applied, whether that's budget constraints, whether it's considering we only want to put forward schemes to government that have already passed a certain stage of development, so we can demonstrate shovel readiness, through to the kind of objective criteria we're interested in, such as air quality, road safety, supporting local development, etc. And in turn, we can turn things on and off, and we can also increase the weighting or the priority of some of those criteria before we start developing draft lists for review.
Thank you.
The data, I was going to quickly add, sorry, the data, some of the data sets are updated annually. So thank you to officers who have provided updates on how different schemes are progressing. So for those schemes that are closer to development, in turn, receive a higher score in the assessment, because we have greater level of assurity that they can be delivered.
Thank you. Rupert.
Keith, if I may, thank you.
Please do.
Sorry, Keith, sorry.
No,
thank you for that. It's just, and I think that has answered it. But I think once we had a chance to apply it to schemes, it is then sort of use that as a measurement check to make sure, the inputs and what it is then saying, is that what we thought it would, and is that helping us? And if it isn't, is there still that flexibility? I think you reassured me. I think it's just a marker down, Keith, that it's a sort of ongoing approach of monitoring. I think that's what I would say. But thank you.
Absolutely. Rupert.
Yeah, thank you. I just, again, to reassure Councillor Humby, the board and the members of the board are the decision makers. This is just an aid to help you make that decision. And the point about flexibility is absolutely part of this. So that slide that you've got up shows those feedback loops. So if something isn't working, then we have that opportunity to reflect on that and amend the process.
Brilliant. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? None showing on my screen. So we'll go to the recommendation. So the recommendation is that, well, it's written there. Are we happy to agree the recommendation as printed? Or anyone objecting against?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And we'll assume that's agreed. So we then come to the lorry parking study, which I think, Kate, you're going to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of this item is to ask the members of the Partnership Board to agree the draft TFSE lorry parking study. The purpose of the study was to help the DFT and other public bodies understand the experience of lorry drivers and provide an evidence base for policy development on HGV lorry parking and the welfare needs of drivers. Paul Wilkes from AECOM, who produced the recently completed study, is here today, and he will give you a short presentation about it very shortly. It's long been recognised that there are problems with lorry parking across the South East, with the lack of facilities that drivers face when they do find a recognised place to park, and the impacts lorry parking can have on local communities when they park in lay-bys or in industrial estates instead. While the DFT has undertaken various lorry parking surveys on the SRN in England over the last decade or so, the most recent of these didn't provide us with enough of a complete picture to give us a clear picture or a situation across our geography. So we commissioned AECOM to carry out a more detailed study in our area using a similar methodology and extending it to cover some of the MRN and other A roads, but also supplementing it with driver surveys to find out about their experience at those recognised truck stops. AECOM began this work in October 2022, and a draft report was completed in August 2023. This was then circulated to the Transport Strategy Working Group, as well as the Senior Officers Group for both of their reviews, and their comments have been incorporated into the final draft. I'll now hand over to Paul Wilkes, who will give you more information about the study, how it was carried out, its outcomes and findings. Paul.
Thanks, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll go to the next slide, please. Yeah, that's fine. As Kate said, I'm here to talk about the lorry parking study, which we completed last year. I just want to give a quick background to us to explain why it was important that we were commissioned for this piece of work. As the Freight and Fleet team within AECOM, we've been the leading consultancy in lorry parking for quite some years now and have completed many studies, including the Department for Transport National Survey of HGV parking, National Highways review of lorry parking facilities, and a number of other lorry parking projects and strategies for other STBs and local authorities. So to talk about the study, we were asked to bring our expertise to look at lorry parking in the TFC area, and we did this by bringing together the information from existing studies to identify current and future parking gaps. As Kate said, we looked at the DFT National Survey, which we had recently updated in 2022, and this covered the strategic road network and a 5-kilometre buffer around it. And that meant that it didn't cover any of the roads beyond that 5-kilometre buffer, which left quite a large gap when you're looking at a regional area in terms of our understanding of where these trucks are parking overnight. Can I have the next slide, please? So we built on our existing data set with 3 different activities. Firstly, we carried out nighttime audits on a sample of non-SRN routes, including industrial estate clusters. And this covered around 31% of non-SRN routes and gave us a statistically valid sample to allow us to factor up the numbers to give a forecast for the entire non-SRN network in the region. Secondly, we completed a series of driver surveys at SRN sites to enable a better understanding of overnight parking preferences by drivers and identify any further issues. And thirdly, we developed a series of route profiles, 11 for SRN and 1 for non-SRN lorry parking routes, by pulling together all of the different information we had for these. And these were useful because the demand for lorry parking isn't consistent across the region, and it's a useful way of highlighting how that changes across the different routes. So what did we find? Go to the next slide, please. So an estimated 77% of HGV parking at night takes place on the SRN. And of that 77%, 72% park in truck stops, which is great. 19% park at laybys and 9% park at industrial estates. And you can see from the top 2 tables that the number of each type of parking location on the SRN and non-SRN is shown. And it's worth remembering for the non-SRN table on the right that this is based on the 31% audit findings factored up to cover the whole network. So these numbers are indicative, not necessarily actual. And they add up to 5,435 HGVs parked overnight every night for both the SRN and non-SRN routes. And if you look at the bottom table, you can see that there's currently an excess demand for on-site parking of 868 for the SRN and 674 for the non-SRN, which is 1,528 spaces in total. And this assumes that any vehicle parked at an industrial estate or lay-by would park at a truck stop if the space was available. And the excess demand also takes into account the sites on the network which are not fully utilised. And using a number of factors, which you can read more about in our report, but I won't go into now, we developed a forecast for the demand out to 2040 against low, medium and high case scenarios. And at a high case scenario, we're forecasting an increase in excess demand from 1,528 spaces currently up to 2,774 by 2040. Next slide, please. I talked about the driver survey feedback. We surveyed a number of drivers at 8 motorway service areas across the TFC area. And in total, we talked to 42 different drivers. And the key feedback was that the drivers weren't particularly, or they didn't have particularly any preferences on sites. It was more around the location of the site when they needed to stop at the end of their day's journey. They relied very heavily on their local knowledge of the area to know where sites were. And a key issue for them was making sure that whatever site they were parked at, it was as close to the SRN as possible to make it as easy for them to restart their journey the next day. And they highlighted a number of issues as well. So things like lack of security measures, including absence of CCTV, lighting and fencing, was raised at a number of locations, and inadequate facilities such as toilets and showers. And this is not just specific to TFSE, it's this we've seen across the whole country. And there's work being done by the DFT and National Highways. They've got a fund together to look at how they can address and update some of the facilities to bring them up to a better standard. We also had the interesting feedback that some of the drivers would rather run the risk associated with not parking at an MSA rather than pay the high costs associated with parking there. Next slide, please. I talked about the route profiles, which hopefully you can see the detail of here. And this is a summary of the data we've got for the M20, A20. And it shows on the left a map of the route with the parking sites identified. And they've been overlaid with the known crime hotspots. And you might just be able to see there's a red circle around Maidstone as a key crime hotspot. And this was identified within the Police National Vehicle Crime Intelligence Survey Freight Cargo Crime Report. And I highlighted the parking hotspots which we've seen, and this is based on the truck stop sites where we have witnessed parking utilisation of 85% or above at the site, and that was through the national DFT surveys. And as this is a key route, you'll be able to see that all 5 of the truck parking sites on the route are hotspots. Which isn't really a surprise. In the top right, for each of the surveys, we show the number of truck stops on the route, and below that, the demand factors which might drive that growth. And then to the left of that, in the table in the centre at the top, we've got a profile, we've identified the current excess parking demand specifically for that route and the growth forecast out to 2040 against those low, medium and high case scenarios. And you can see for this route, we would see excess demand increasing from 145 at present to 432 high case in 2040. And then bottom right, we've also included a summary of each truck stop on the route, and it shows what services are provided. So you can see the range of services that are on offer from each of those sites. Next slide, please. So I've shown the potential size of the excess lorry parking demand within the TFSE area, and we've developed a number of recommendations, mainly around sharing the report and the information. You can see the first 2 around sharing that with the local transport authorities and local planning authorities to make them aware of any, if there are any opportunities for new lorry parking sites, then they're aware of whether or not that there's a particular need for it on that route or area. Share the report with the National Highways. They're always interested to understand what's happening away from the SRN, because there is a link between that and the SRN. Includes, as these are strategic sites for HGVs, it's worth including in the map, looking at alternative fuel charging sites and make sure that's built into the tool so that these are included in there. Share the report, its recommendations with truck stop developers and operators. We know there's some developers out there that are interested in buying new sites or purchasing and developing existing sites. So it's good to make them aware of where the opportunities are for their investment. And share the information with HGV operators and drivers to encourage them to make better use of lorry parking at the formal truck stops and motorway service areas. Add the information about the sites and the report to the TFSE website, and consider running a communications campaign with drivers and operators in the area, and produce a truck stop guide with locations of known facilities to better share the information about what sites are available and the facilities that are available there. And share the report and its findings with the wider South East Freight Forum to discuss potential ways of addressing the issues that have been highlighted in the report and look at how these can be resolved. So that was that covers all of the information I wanted to pick out from our study, and I'll now hand back to Kate for any further discussion or questions.
Thanks, Paul. How have people got a question for us, Paul or myself? I believe Mike Broughton had one.
Hi, Kate. Thank you very much. Matt Borson. I'm leader of Tunbridge and Moorland Borough Council in West Kent and one of the district and borough representatives on the board. I wanted to pick up on something Paul said at the very end there about disseminating the report, which is very interesting in and of itself. And I'm pleased this is going to local planning authorities. If I can be parochial for a moment, the reason that piqued my interest is because we have a particular I won't say who it is, a particular operator who is very keen to build a truck stop in the borough, but just happens to be next to the motorway, and it is in Greenbelt and AONB. So we've got a real tension between the need for a truck stop in the area and planning policy on the other side, because of course the constraints that you've got on Greenbelt and AONB. So my request built on that was twofold. Firstly, the simple one is, can I have a soft copy of the report, if that's okay? Because it could be very helpful for us in determining that planning application one way or the other. But secondly, and probably of more relevance to all of those on the meeting, is how far do you intend to go in terms of engaging with critically the operators of these sorts of facilities and, frankly, anyone involved in the freight industry? Because and I see David Roby's got his hand up from Kent as well, but we found issues where you can change something in one particular location, so it becomes harder to park or something like that, and you simply just move the problem. So when we had a situation a few years ago in Kent where you had KCC were able to enforce in the east of the county but not in the west of the county, and the problem just moved from east to west as well. So I'm quite keen that we use this sort of work that you've done to try and stop that happening and have a more strategic and holistic approach to dealing with the vexed issue of lorry parking in all its forms.
Thank you. Kate, do you want to take that one now?
I think so, because I'm very aware of the site that Matt's talking about, and will willingly share it. And I believe Mr. Wren has also said that it's been brought to the attention of your committee. But I think we need to work out a strategy for how we take this forward. We have a recently established wider Southeast Freight Forum, which has developers, operators, freight logistics, local authorities. They're all involved. So we would like to take it to them, because I think it would be interesting to get their perspective on it and to get perhaps more information about this pull-push factors that you mentioned, because I think that is one that needs to be considered quite carefully. I think the other issue is that in sharing it, we hope to raise the issue to everybody's and put it on everybody's horizon, because I think it came up as part of, particularly as part of the call for evidence that the DFT and Jubiluck gave out about planning and freight and logistics last year. So we need to work with our local authorities, both from a transport officers and planning officers, to try and work out how these difficult resolutions or how these difficult issues can be resolved to the satisfaction of everyone, because obviously we have, the residents are involved just as much as local councils and councillors. So we will come back to the board with more information and progress on this once we've had a chance to speak to all those different stakeholders that we've mentioned in those recommendations. And I think it does need very careful balancing, as you say.
Thank you. It is the start of another process. So, David.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a KCC member, but I'm an Ashford member, so I'm very familiar with the A20 corridor and the points that have just been raised about the problem. And as it happens, I was a borough councillor at Ashford before, and one of the first resident queries I had to deal with back in 2011 was somebody complaining about lorries parking outside her house and then doing the toilet in the garden. So that led me into it, and I've had an interest in it since. I mean, I welcome the report. I think it's a good report. I think that the end position we need to be aiming for is, this is a statement of the obvious, is that we've got enough proper lorry parking capacity within the county and perhaps even outside the county, because it's not just a Kent problem. It tends to get dumped on Kent because of the geography. So I think it's a national thing and we need the capacity. But once we've got the capacity, they've got to be made to use them one way or the other, and it's going to be a stick and carrot thing. I mean, I think it's a driver welfare issue at one end, because do we really want people doing the toilet in people's gardens in 2023 in Britain? When we ought to have alternative facilities, that's not really the way you want to go. But I think in a big distribution work, either a Tesco or a Unilever, quite often the work at the end gets given to a subcontractor who could easily be the guy from Lithuania with the Scania, and he's the one who hasn't got the money and he's doing the toilet in the garden sort of thing. And I think we've got to get to a stage where people are prepared to pay a bit more for the shirt in Primark or the can of beans in Tesco or whatever it is, in order that the transport costs a bit more, in order that the drivers are in a truck stop, and of course you need the truck stops in the first place. So I think that's the sort of general direction I see, and I welcome the reporter's progress on that route.
Thank you. I think we can all agree with that. Is there anything you want to add to that, or shall I just go to Joy now? Go to Joy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really following up on David's points, I think, more than anything, in so much as, it's going to be about costs, because we have facilities on the A23. But when I've asked lorry drivers who are doing exactly as David says, and I've stopped and asked them why they're parking on little side lanes, inappropriate parking, they put it down to cost. So it's about, what do we do? Stick and carrot, or do you make it free so there's no excuse?
A very good point to consider, I guess, but it'll be probably more of a national debate about whether it's free or not. If I can't see that being left to us at the local level. Is there anything either of you want to add to that?
I think I would only agree with both David and Joy. It is a cost issue, I think, and I'm pretty sure that's would be backed up by Paul's research, as it has been in the report. And I think it is something that we perhaps do need to have conversations about with operators, but also with the Highways Agency as well. I think that would be quite useful, because I think it's something that we do have to address. But as I say, we're at the early doors of next steps. So let's see where some of those conversations take us. And as I said, I'll report back.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just come back in on that one? It is costing us, because obviously it's costing the districts to clear, but it also means, the number of requests I get for TROs, etc., to try and prevent lorries from parking up overnight on particularly the small lanes. Yeah.
Thank you, Joy. I've made a note of that.
David, was yours an intervention on the same point? If not,
yes, it was. Purely on the cost thing. I don't see it can never be free. Somebody's got to pay for it. Yeah, but I mean, but you need to find a way around the problem of the guy having to put his hand in his pocket, or the employer giving him £5 a night when it costs £50 or whatever it is. And I mean, I don't know whether there's such things as making it that when people buy a cross-channel ticket, for example, they have to pay extra to get a coupon that can only be redeemed at a lorry park. If you see what I mean. Now, obviously, that would be a cost on the operators, but nobody would be able to avoid it, and every other lorry drivers would be in the lorry park. You still need the capacity, though. I mean, I think it's imaginative solutions like that that are required, but obviously you need national government to help with that, because it probably require legislation.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right, but I do think it's wider than us, but we can come up with some good suggestions. Rob, thank you for hanging on.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. First of all, excellent piece of work, huge amount of data and very valuable. I think there's two things here. There's also a fundamental issue, Keith, and what is the role of TFSE? I'm a little bit concerned. There is nobody really, there isn't any clarity on who is responsible. And then there is a risk that LTAs and maybe TFSE are taking on a role that we could be asked to sort of address it and deal with it, when it's not actually us to do that. And I know Rupert made a comment last time about, is it right TFSE lobby? And I think it absolutely is. So we've identified, if you like, the scale of the problem. And I think there is a role here for us to maybe lobby DFT. But what I don't think we should be doing is definitely we shouldn't be identifying sites. then we start to put pressure already on local authorities that are already struggling with their budgets anyway. Absolutely share it with planning authorities, because they are, they have a role to consider the need for HGV facilities on that unmet demand, I suppose you could put it like that. It would seem to me, and it's interesting that Nick was on earlier, wasn't it, that there's a role here for maybe DfT to take on this issue, and then going forward, maybe there is a new role placed on National Highways to take that action. I'm just worried that we might be making ourselves a problem that, that we have to deal with, and it's not our issue to deal with. It's a serious problem and it's a serious issue, but I just think we need to be careful. And I don't see any problem with us lobbying to make that point with the data that we've now got, Keith. I'm quite worried about not only this particular issue, about what is our role for TFSE, Keith.
Let me give you your assurance from the chairman, and then the rest of the team will tell me I've got it totally wrong. But my view is we're doing this on behalf of the South East, and we will present our findings to DfT and all of the other planning authorities and whatever. I don't think that puts any responsibility on us, and I'm in the same place as you. We should identify where there are hotspots, but we certainly shouldn't be identifying the solution to those hotspots on where they're going. Because, I expect Matt, with his planning hat on, would be disgusted to have Transport for the South East to say, and by the way, it's that site should be allocated there, because I don't think we've got that power. But I think having this information pulled together is what was needed, because it was never... if you like, never concluded. There was bits and pieces done here and there, but I think this gives an overall view of the parking issue. So I'm with you on that. Now, I don't know whether Kate or Paul want to add anything to my interpretation of the purpose of this.
I think you're perfectly correct, Councillor Glazier, and I think you hit the nail on the head. So our role is intermediary, raising other people's attention and providing that supporting evidence base that they can then work with to do what they need to do in their particular areas. If we can bring people together, we can do that. We can do that as well. We can facilitate those conversations. So I hope that gives you some comfort, Councillor Humbley.
Yeah, if I may come back, absolutely, and I agree with all that. Just got to make sure it's not interpreted. So you've identified this, so therefore you've got to fix it. And there is a risk that could happen if we don't keep an eye on it.
I have noted those, and I will make sure that doesn't. So that's fine.
Thank you. Put it in plain English, Rob. Is that all right? That'd be good. So there's no ambiguity. But seriously, again. I think we've been blessed today. We've got some really good reports coming through, and so thank you for all those that have been involved in this. We are asked to, as it says on the board, members recommend to agree the Transport for South East Lorry Parking Study Report. Are we happy to do that? No one against? Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to the Regional Centre for Excellence. I'm sorry, I can't move my computer at the moment to find out who's introducing. I will very shortly, I hope.
Hello, Chair. It's me, Emily.
Emily, apologies. I'm on the next page now. Thank you.
No
Over
problem.
to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If I could just have the next slide, please, Jamie. Great, thank you. Hello everyone, I'm going to just be providing a very quick update on the development of the Regional Centre of Excellence to date. So I'm joined today by Kate Fairhill from Arup and Max Roche from Arup, so hopefully everyone will have met with them because they have been with us for a while now. So if I could just move over to the next slide, please. So the intention to cover today is just a very quick recap on the background, and then just providing you with an update on where we're at with the project, and then going over some of the progress that's been made. So we'll be looking at the governance, stakeholder engagement, components, functionality, skills, users and partners, management plan and steering group. So they're the deliverables that we've achieved so far. And then we're also just going to be commenting on the fiscal benefits of the Regional Centre of Excellence, and then looking at next steps. So if I could just move over to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I think that everyone will be familiar with this, but just to recap, so the Levelling Up White Paper, which was published in 2022, included the commitments to develop regional centres of excellence, and so in turn the DfT asked STBs to create their own for their regions. So as a result, we were awarded 250,000 for the year 23-24, in which we have appointed Arup to continue this development as they were included within the local capability and also the roadmap, which was signed off last March. So we have had them working with us since July 2023 as part of the technical call-off consortium, which was approved at that July board. Thank you. If I could just have the next slide. So this is just a really quick overview of the 5 tasks. So there are deliverables within each one. So what we've achieved to date so far was the alignment and prioritisation, which was up until the end of September. So that established the governance, which will run up until the end of the project. And then within task 2, we've also done lots of planning and engagement. So we've met with universities, external partners, and all of the local authorities on a one-to-one basis, and then also via steering groups, which have been established as well. So all of that engagement is used to inform and shape the specification of the platform, and then once it's live as well. And so at the moment, we're just in task 3. So we're just creating the platform. So at the end of January, we should be in a position to be able to commission the digital consultant to start actually building the platform. So we're in the exciting stage now. So we have geared up the engagement with the steering group to sort of make them understand what kind of expectations we need from them, as it just does sort of pick up the pace a little bit. And then as we move into task 4 and task 5, we are moving into the launch and then ongoing maintenance. So that steering group will continue through the life cycle of the project, but it might just be that it is more on an ad hoc basis as and when we need things rather than on a monthly basis like it is now. So if I could just have the next slide, please. So this is just a very quick capture of the governance. Apologies, it looks like the boxes have just come through as black there. But essentially what those 2 black boxes are, the bottom one is the Regional Centre of Excellence Steering Group, and then the one just before the Partnership Board is the Senior Officer Group. And that just basically sets out how we are trying to feed the information from the development. So it will come through that steering group back into the delivery team. So that will be myself and colleagues at TFSC and Arup. And then we will be presenting it back to the Senior Officer Group and Partnership Board like normal, just to get that sign off. But they are being shaped and informed by all of the forums that are existing within TFSC, and then how we can utilise them to make best practice and get some shared information from them as well. So we'll be moving on to the progress update. So I will be handing over to Kate. So just on that next slide. So that's great. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon. So this slide provides an overview of the stakeholder engagement completed to date on the project. So firstly, we held a workshop with the LTAs on the 11th of September last year to ensure that the roadmap was still fit for purpose and to validate next steps. We've also held 13 interviews with the LTAs to discuss the key components, the structure, the functionality and partners for the Regional Centre of Excellence. The outputs from these discussions have been collated to form a specification for the digital platform, which is in development. We've also distributed a university survey and joined the university panel, and we have plans for further engagement with them and the other partners. Overall, it is worth highlighting that there is a desire for the Centre of Excellence to be co-designed to ensure that the content is enhanced, supported and makes good use of the existing tools and guidance available at a national and local level. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the confirmed requirements for the virtual platform. Some new components have been added based on upon the recent engagement, such as the case studies, funding, procurement, news and blogs, which are all viewed to be important. And then the next slide talks about the functionality requirements of the platform. So firstly, there will be some restrictions. So core users will have access to everything, and other partners will have limited access to some areas, such as the chat function. It will be designed to encourage collaboration. It will also encourage learning from others, as well as self-learning, for example, reading materials such as case studies in people's own time. And it will also be modular, so it'll have different elements. So a place for resources, as well as a chat function, but brought together under a single platform. And it will be simple to use, yet visually attractive and aligned to Transport South East branding. Next slide, please. So this is focusing on skills. We have started to capture the skills that the Centre of Excellence will need to focus on. So keywords being modelling, business cases and scheme delivery. We are going to continue to explore what the skills priorities are through further engagement with the LTAs, and we'll create an expertise matrix. So to understand what the current skills levels are and where future focus is required. It is also important to note that skills being focused on will need to link to themes from the DFT objectives, which we will do. And we will also consider how these skills relate to skills maps held by different professional institutions, so we can understand any linkages and overlaps. So I'll now hand over to Max to talk about users and partners.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be here with you all. So this diagram you can see on the screen we've used to help map the different layers of users, partners and stakeholders of the Regional Centre of Excellence. And it also maps the relative level of collaboration, interaction with the platform and the contributions into the Centre of Excellence that we're expecting. So starting with the sponsors at the highest level, those are Department for Transport and TFSE, they've commissioned the project and they will oversee it. So the Regional Centre of Excellence, as Kate has sort of mentioned, has been designed really around the needs of the core users. So those in the centre of the diagram who are the LTAs, and they'll be obtaining the most value from this platform. But that value will require them to be collaborating, sharing their knowledge and experience with their LTA peers. Moving out a layer, we've got the key partners, and we expect and indeed hope they will be using this platform to actively contribute their specialist support, expert guidance, best practice, access to research projects, and etc. Depending on what the opportunities are that are available. We've already done some engagement with these partners early on, and those meetings have been very positive, and they've communicated their support for what we're doing. So some of these partners include professional institutions like CICA, ICE, CIHT, etc., as well as who have their regional centres of excellence of their own. As Emily mentioned before, key universities and bodies such as Active Travel England, National Highways, Network Rail. Other stakeholders, moving a layer out, we've identified as people who will be interested, but may not be actively contributing into the Centre of Excellence. So we'll be keeping them informed, and they include people on this call, elected members, transport operator groups like RDG and CPT, business groups, and other interest groups like Sustrans, Transport Focus. If we go to the next slide, please. So a deliverable from Task 2, as Emily outlined at the top, was a management plan. And that management plan detailed how we intend to bring this Centre of Excellence into being, manage it in its operation, and also prepare for the long term. So the management plan included elements such as the core processes. So that's the slide that you can see on the screen, but also included the role structure that we need for a successful delivery, a plan for partnership engagement, as I mentioned before, and also success measurement for the platform. So just looking at the core processes here in a bit more detail, this slide here illustrates the different processes in the blue bars, and those are the processes we think will drive the right activity at the right stage of the project, which are the orange boxes across the top. The core processes include ongoing project sponsorship, stakeholder engagement and governance, which we'll need throughout the project, and we'll also be capturing the needs of LTAs throughout the commission. The development of the platform and which then transfers into ongoing platform maintenance, have all been detailed, and also the running of the Centre of Excellence. So processes around the nuts and bolts, uploading content, supporting with collaboration and events, communications, and measuring success. We can go to the next slide, please. This slide is essentially a benefits map that we've created to help us plan to measure our success against the overall DFT objectives, which have been set out for us up the top, listed at the top of the diagram there. You'll notice there's some blue numbers and letters. Those correspond to the actual KPI measures and monitoring measures that we will be designing to help monitor the performance and outcomes and benefits, including the fiscal benefits, which I'll hand over to Emily in a moment to speak about. And it's important to note this work will also link to the M&E work stream, measurement and evaluation work stream, which is also part of the broader technical call-off contract. Next slide, please. So here, just a note on the governance. So a steering group has been set up, which comprises a group of the core users, so the LTAs. This group provides guidance on the setup, the design, the ongoing management of the Centre of Excellence, as well as they provide a user testing type function, which is particularly important at this phase of the project as we are co-creating the design with them. And the steering group will ensure that the Regional Centre of Excellence stays in touch with the most pressing needs of LTAs as they emerge as well, and the quality of the outputs that are delivered that are suited to the needs of the Southeast region. So I'll hand back to Emily to talk about fiscal next steps.
That's great. Thank you, Max and Kate. So the fiscal benefits, there should be some text, hopefully, if you... Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So it's just to really set out what the ambitions are for the Centre of Excellence. So it's not just to improve capability and capacity, but it's also to deliver economies of scale. So through that best practice sharing of resources should hopefully improve consistencies as well. And also working with all STBs to try and remove that duplication and try and find out what is available already so that we can then signpost to other people's centres of excellence as well. So we're just trying to really make the best use of what's already out there. And what will also be of benefit to our local authorities, because we do appreciate that some of it needs to be bespoke for our area, but some of them will be able to look at best practice studies from Blackpool, for example, if that has a more similar geographical landscape to somewhere in our region. And so one of our key performance indicators as a result of this will be to measure the cost saving that this platform will provide for our local authorities. So this will be captured through the provision of licenses that will be offered and also training and access to expertise. And then there's also the provision of some data as well. So this will hopefully help people implement and develop business cases. And so just trying to have that shared centre of truth and one area for people to access as well. So just really trying to demonstrate the benefits of this through, as I say, not only the capability and capacity improvements, but also the cost saving that will be associated with it. So if I could just go on to the next slide, please. So this is just the last slide. It's just going to be talking about the next steps. So as we've mentioned, we're in task 3 now. So we are looking at creating the platform. So that will start very soon once we hand over that digital specification. And it will include some testing. So we will be utilising the steering group, but also having a willingness to let that go out further than just the steering group, so that people can try and break it and hopefully won't be able to. And then also welcoming feedback from those people as well to try and make it the most robust platform that we can. And then in conjunction with that, we will also be developing and collating the resources to be able to be populated and published on there. As we move into task 4, so just beyond March, we'll be looking at the management of the virtual platform and then also looking to launch it. So we're looking to have a training and improvement of capability day. And then within that, it will just be a more formal launch of the actual site and physical events itself. So we look forward to working with this on you, and just to thank all colleagues who have been involved with the engagement to date, as it has been really, really useful. So hand back to you, Chair, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any questions or comments on the progress so far? None? Oh, yeah. There was one and then it's disappeared. Dan, thank you. Yes, you're back.
Yes, no problem. I must have somehow handed up down accidentally. Just to say thanks for this, and a really important part, as you know, of the things that we're looking for STBs to do, and it looks like like a really good working development there. So really good. Keep working on that. I mean, I heard you say it, but really important that you link up with the other STBs and what they're doing with their sense of excellence as well. I know you've captured that. But yeah, important that continues. But looks like a really good piece of work. So thanks for presenting it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah. No other comments, but again, it's another exciting development with lots of work going on, and we look forward to seeing the test, if not the end product. So I'm sure it'll take a bit of while to settle in. So thank you all. Thank you. So far, we are asked to note the progress of development on the Regional Centre for Excellence. So I guess we're happy to do that. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. So we come on to agenda item 9, and thank you for that, to the Audit and Governance Committee. And Joy, Councillor Dennis, would you like to introduce, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. We, on Thursday, 11th of January was our last meeting. It was a lively and very engaging meeting. I know that most of you also feel shocked that an audit and governance meeting can feel lively, engaging, but it was, and it really provoked some conversation. In the report, I'm sure you've all read it, the first 2 reports I just want to make comment about. The first one sets out how TFSC delivers value for money. And you'll see there was 2 papers, how we deliver it and how then we deliver value for partners. They were both very welcomed by the committee, but we asked for further work to be included covering the fiscal assessment of the financial savings and how we use the plan to focus on where TFSC adds value. And the second report, which also set out the impacts of inflation on our projects and how this is impacting our local authorities. And we particularly, we wish to highlight the report provided a good overview, but we asked for further information on supply chain availability, market confidence, specific material purchase to be included. So we've asked for those reports to be returned to the committee at the 9th of April meeting, and they'll be presented to the board on the 13th of May. We also, just to highlight, the draft annual report outline was reviewed. We agreed the structure. And this will be presented to the board as a standalone item on the 13th of May. We also reviewed the risk register, and I think I just want to note 2 items that were added, risk 20 and risk 21. The first one, that local authorities may not be willing to bear the risk associated with large schemes, which could lead to failing to deliver our transport strategy. And risk 21, the dissolution of the local enterprise partnerships, the LEPs, in March, and it should say 24, not 23, leaves a gap in business representation within the TFSC governance structure that we need to consider. And we also just highlight the 4 risks that have a high probability impact, which were risk 9, 15, 16 and 20. I won't read them out per se. I'm sure you've looked at them yourselves. And then there are 9 risks that remain a medium probability and impact after mitigation. And as you can tell, we reviewed them quite succinctly, I can assure you. There's a number that we'll discuss quite some depth. And you'll see there are 2 recommendations. One to note our discussions and actions, and the second one to agree the strategic risk register. As I say, it was quite lively.
Thank you very much. It sounds like a good meeting, and it's really important that we do keep on top of monitoring where we're at. So thank you all for doing that. Are there any questions or comments for the Audit Committee? Rob, Councillor Humby.
Yeah, in the tone of it being a lively meeting, yes, it was. But I'd like to thank and Joy. I think those risk registers 20 and 21 were really important, and Joy, it was a really good meeting. And I thank you for that and those discussions and that being added, because I think it was really important. Keith, as you know, I'm always talking about in terms of what our role is and that and the risk to it, to make sure that we are still there and keep functioning, as a whole group, as in a partnership. And it's quite right that we identify those risks. So just really to say thank you to Joy for a good meeting, and really pleased to see those added and a good report. Thank you.
And if I could thank you, Councillor Humby, for being such a vocal participant.
Yeah, okay. Let me think about that one, Joy. Okay?
Yeah. If we can ever get that minuted, I'll frame it. But there you go. Thank you very much, both of you. There's no other questions or comments. Seriously, we are you're doing a really important job, and without that, we put ourselves at risk. So thank you all very much. So as Joyce says, we're asked to note the discussions arising from the Committee of the Audit and Governance Committee and asked to agree the Strategic Risks Register. No one against? Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we then come to the finance update, and Sarah, I think you're going to do that, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update the board on the budget position till the end of Q3, which is the end of December 2023. So the table at Appendix 1 sets out the position. A couple of things to note. The main technical programme is the main element of expenditure, with now that accounting for 700,000 out of the 1.5 million total spend to date. The staffing costs are as expected now that we have a full complement of staff recruited to TFSE, so that is looking like it will forecast out as expected. Spend on the technical programme is increasing rapidly now that projects through the call-off contract are actually underway. And just on that, since the contract has been up and running 6 months ago, we've now commissioned over £1 million worth of work through that contract. So that's been a real help to us to really accelerate work through our technical programme. The forecast is currently £1.8 million of expenditure on the technical programme. There are other work outside of the call-off contract that goes through the technical programme, and this will continue to be monitored obviously as we approach the year end of the financial year. The operation and communications budget has a spend to date of around about 50,000. This budget is projecting an underspend of around about 100,000. That's due predominantly to us deciding not to print any vast quantities of the strategic investment plan, instead relying on the electronic copies, and also far less legal support and assistance than we had envisaged. The technical programme itself is forecasting an underspend of around about 700,000. I think first of all it's worth saying that this is a significant reduction on the amount last year when we carried forward £2 million of expenditure. So DFT do want us to reduce the expenditure, and we are making some really good inroads to that. It's been really helped by having the indicative funding allocation, but there is still the issue with us not actually receiving our final budget till away into the financial year, which does mean we can't actually get going with all the work that we want to as soon as we would like to. However, of that 700,000 projected carry forward, 226,000 of it is already committed, and that's shown with an asterisk in the table in Appendix 1. That's predominantly for work that actually, the timescale for the work spans across financial years. So the work is committed, the work is underway, it just won't be fully spent this financial year because the work doesn't complete until next financial year. The remaining 475,000 carry forward from the technical programme has been ring-fenced within the budget, the business plan for 24-25 that the board signed off and approved in December. And also the 100,000 of operation and comms budget has also been allocated through that business planning process to be spent in the next financial year. Happy to take any questions on the budget position to date before moving on to the other part of the report.
Any questions on the budget? No, appears to be none. So do you want to carry on?
Brilliant, thank you. So the last part of the report was just to remind the board that following your approval of the draft business plan at the December meeting, this has now been submitted to the Department for Transport by the deadline, which was the end of December last year. As we understand it, DFT officials, I don't know whether Dan might want to come in and say anything here, are sort of currently considering all the various business plans they've got from the STBs before they'll be making their recommendation to ministers.
Thank you. Dan, if you want to come in, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, just thanks to the team for getting the business plan in on time to us just before Christmas, which you did, which was great. Thank you for doing that. In terms of an update, yeah, as you summarised there, Sarah. So we're now reviewing the business plans from all the STBs with a view to shortly providing advice to ministers on funding for next year. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to move the process through more quickly this year. We note your point, Sarah, that it's you always want to get your funding allocations in earlier in the year rather than later, and we're aware of that. So we're just reviewing the plans at the moment with a view to shortly providing advice to ministers on the position, and we'll of course keep you updated with that.
Thank you. We can only wish you well, and hopefully it'll be a smooth run through for you. Any questions on that? Councillor Humby, Rob.
I'm frightened to put my hand up now because I got any comments, but I'll carry on. First of all, two good reports, and it's great to see the business plan, and it's noted and supported as well. Keith, I was more for you, just whether you'd seen the report about the Midlands Connect and TfN don't have a member subscription fees. I was just wondering where that sat with us on sort of levelling up, Keith.
Answer: no, I haven't, and I'm sorry I've missed that. As you know, part of the membership fee for us has been the key part of us drawing in significant funds from DfT in the past. If they're going to get away with it, or somebody else pay their fees for them, then we might need to think about that in the future. But,
understood, and I wasn't really. It was just more that I had seen that, and that is out there, and I thought it will be raised at some point. So I'm just raising it. I'm not supporting it or not supporting it. I'm just raising the point. I expect Rupert's got a comment on that.
No, I'm sure he won't have. Rupert.
Thank you. I mean, you're correct in that there are 5 subnational transport bodies that draw a local contribution and 2 that don't. And members will recall that when we established Transport South East, the local contribution enabled us to secure much greater levels of DfT funding. I think we are, of course, acutely aware of the pressure that our local authority colleagues are all under. There's some really difficult decisions around where you prioritise investment. Is it social care? Is it place-based services? And we will be having ongoing conversations with the department about the viability of some of those contributions going forward.
Just to go back to, I think I got in early, Rob, in my last newsletter by acknowledging that and saying that genuinely it is a really difficult decision. What I think we as a board and we as a group need to do is to continue to show our value, not only to DfT and other people up the chain, but actually to ourselves, that actually the combined efforts and the combined knowledge that we've managed to bring together over these last 5 years is actually worth a premium. I accept that it's really, really difficult. We've all been there. We've got more to do. But if we can continue to show that we're worth our subscription fee, for a better want of a word, then I think we stand some chance of keeping us together. So I hope that it doesn't change the thing, but it also helps me understand that we've got to still prove that we're worth our salt. So we'll continue to do that. Colleagues, we're asked to note the current financial position for 22-23 to the end of December, including the forecast for the end of the year, and note that the business plan arrived and was submitted on time. So are we happy to do that?
Yes, noted. Agreed.
Thank you. We come to a response for consultation. Rupert, do you want to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There's just 2 responses. One is in relation to GTR, Govia Thameslink Railway, and the South Coast, the Southwest Coastway service. Broadly support the what they're seeking to achieve. What we have said is that where direct services change, that the interchange, if that makes sense, where you have to change trains to get another way you're losing a direct service, that is adequate to smooth the passage from one platform for another, for example. But the response is relatively short and contained within your pack. The second one is in relation to Reading Borough Council's transport strategy. We made a number of suggestions. I think they've set out a really good strategy. There's clearly challenges, but also opportunities facing Reading. And what is key is the alignment to the strategic investment plan, which broadly they have done. So those 2 responses are there for you to consider.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions on either of those 2? No. Okay. Well, we'll consider them approved. If that's the case. No one against, thank you. Right, so Rupert, we'll come to your lead officer's report.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The following items are predominantly for information would ask members just to take the paper as read, and I'm really happy to take questions on what we've been up to since we last met.
Any questions for Rupert? None? Okay, well, we'll note the report. Activities of Transport South East between October and December. Thank you for that, Rupert. Jeff, you're going to introduce Transport Forum update, please.
Yeah, thanks. Well, congratulations if you've managed to stick with it to pages 175 and 176. Your concentration does you great credit, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a sort of interesting time, if you remember, for the Transport Forum. It had got big and unwieldy, and we wanted to change the pattern of meetings and that sort of thing. What we're going to have, or let's just say what we're going to do. So the first face-to-face Transport Forum, this is all of the people that used to be involved, will take place on Thursday, April the 11th, at a suitable central location, i.e. somewhere that's easy to get to by public transport. But what we're also introducing, before I get on to the advisory panel, but what we're also introducing is a digital engagement, which will be a live Q&A session with Rupert as the lead officer and Keith as the chair. I hope they've been pre-warned about that, as a way of allowing people who are members of the forum or the wider forum to actually raise questions and query answers, I guess. And we're intending to have that sort of digital engagement perhaps twice a year, in September, in the autumn. What you'll also remember is, as part of the Transport Forum, we decided what we needed to have was an advisory panel. And the advisory panel was going to take each of the thematic groups and ask them to put one individual forward for it. And those people will sit on the advisory panel by the end of February. The thematic group terms of reference, these people are currently being drafted by officers. The first advisory panel meeting will be held week commencing April the 29th, just before, a couple of weeks before the next board meeting. So that's what we're doing. We've changed it significantly, tried to get different things in, direct access to Rupert and Keith as appropriate, getting each of the thematic groups to identify one individual to be part of the Transport Forum, and for the wider Transport Forum meeting twice a year. So that's all. Happy to take questions as long as they're easy ones.
It sounds like quite an effort to get that far, Jeff. I mean, let's be absolutely honest. The success that you created in the forum was enormous, because it did start to outgrow any expectations. So well done on that. And so I think refining it is a great thing to do. Are there any questions for Jeff? I mean, apart from our thanks for what he does. No,
that's it. Thank you for not asking any.
We're asked to note the plan for the forum for 2024 following the recent Transport Forum review. Are we happy to do that? Thank you, Jeff.
Good. Thank you.
14 is the Transport Strategy Refresh Update. Mark, I think you're just going to do a short introduction.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report just provides members of the board with an update on the technical and engagement work that we're undertaking as part of the transport strategy refresh. Happy to take any questions on any of the content that's set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions for Mark? No? Well, thank you again, Mark, for a good report. And members are asked to note progress with the work to refresh the transport strategy. Thank you. So we come to the delivery of the strategic investment plan. And Sarah, you're going to introduce, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Very similar to the last item, the report sets out a number of sort of just updating the board on the position of where we are with developing the strategic investment plan and how we deliver the interventions through the SIP. Again, quite happy to take any questions based on the report, if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? No. Again, there's an awful lot going on and it's good to see it. So thank you for that. We are asked to note the progress of a range of work streams to support the strategic investment plan. I guess we're happy to do that. Thank you. 16 is the technical programme update. Mark, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report just provides members of the board with an update on various elements of our technical work programme that we haven't heard about on the rest of the agenda. So an update on the work we're undertaking on the development of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, work on the development of the regional active travel strategy, progress on the delivery of the future mobility strategy, further update on the non-lorry parking elements of the freight logistics work we have ongoing and the work we have going on decarbonisation. Happy to take any questions on any of the contents set out in the report.
Thank you, Mark. Trevor. Councillor Newton. We can't hear you, Trevor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Let's hope for me. Thank you. Thanks for the reports on these matters. I was going to quickly just check in on the EV charging infrastructure. Clearly, there was a drive to improve upon that, and the report identifies that need and that program. It clearly involves quite a lot of there's a number of hurdles or barriers to deliver that at pace, and the emphasis is to work with, say, the power suppliers, the UK Power Network, for example. Are we confident that the programme for delivery is possible, or do you think the risks are so substantive that we're not going to deliver those at pace? So clearly there's a roadmap there being presented, but where the hazards and risks associated with some of the big barriers, particularly in terms of power supply capacity. It's one of the constraints in Brighton and Hove, for instance, where we have got quite concerns about trying to get high, very rapid charging points into our city. So I just really flag that in that. I don't know if you can respond in this regard.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes, just very quickly. I mean, our role here is a sort of convening role. I mean, the working group that we run has both the local authorities, the charge point operators, UK Power Networks on there, and very much to bring together that community of people who need to be talking to one another about these issues, because you're absolutely right. There are some significant challenges ahead in terms of getting this infrastructure out at the pace that is needed to ensure that it keeps pace with the supposed uptake of electric vehicles, and if we don't, it will affect that. So it puts our sort of decarbonisation plans at risk. So we're doing everything that we can. We've sort of in a position to offer more. Very keen through the DFT, such that if there was an ask on us to do more work in this area, there's an offer from us to do that because of our convening ability, trying to do more work to encourage particularly local transport authorities, to work together more on, cross-boundary issues with the development and implementation of this infrastructure. So significant challenges ahead, but I think we're playing our part in bringing people together to try and talk through some of these difficult challenges that you've highlighted.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Rob, Councillor Humby.
Yeah, just a sort of general question about when we're looking at all this, how do we, as an organisation, I suppose, keep up to date with sort of policy change or announcements coming out from central government that might affect this? I mean, I get 5 or 6, 7 policy sort of updates throughout the course of a day on things that are happening and changing. Just how do we do that? How do we manage that at TPSE?
Well, we're very, connected in through DFT and through the OZEV unit, which is, the sort of the engine of future planning in this area from a government point of view. So, and we also have a joint STB working group on this issue. So there's the opportunity for us to share ideas and knowledge and reconnaissance with one another. So as much as we're able, we keep make sure we're up to date with the latest thinking about how this issue is going to move forward, as with many of the other technical work areas that we're involved with.
It's sort of done, if I may, Chair, through other organisations. We don't sort of actively monitor that, I suppose I could say. It's just done through as a matter of course with being involved with other groups.
Yes, I think this is an area for our development through the Centre of Excellence. It's something with a resource we could be more proactive on. In this area, potentially having more resource devoted to active reconnaissance of chasing down some of this information as it comes forward. We do have a strong listening ear, but our ear could always be made stronger. But that would need additional resource as we move forward. But I think the Centre of Excellence provides us potentially with a vehicle to do that, to be collecting this information as soon as we hear it and broadcasting it out through the Centre of Excellence to keep everybody up to date on exactly what is happening on this issue and lots of the other work that we're involved with. So something for us to think about more as we move forward.
That's brilliant, Martin. If I may, Chairman, that was your point about saying adding value and the value we have. So it keeps us on the front foot, and being on the front foot is hugely valuable. Thank you, Mark.
It is. Thank you. No other questions. We have 5 recommendations there to note. So are we all happy to do that? Yeah. Okay, so we come on to agenda item 17, which is communications and stakeholder engagement update. Duncan, please.
Thank you, Chair. The detail regarding comms and engagement activity is clearly outlined in the board paper. We're in a healthy place. Our social engagement figures increase, our newsletter sign-ups increase, as do our podcast listening as well. And we continue to roll out and hit the objectives of our comms and engagement plan for 2023-2024, and to continue to provide support to other team members with things like the transport strategy refresh, with engagement activity like Your Voices. All of the detail is in the board paper, but I'm more than happy to take any questions or observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Well, a big thank you to me. I'm sure Rupert would agree. And our podcasts seem to grow, and I just think the value of them is enormous. And some of the other ones, not just the 2 that we've participated in, it's another good way of getting good information out there. So well done on that front. Are there any questions or comments for Duncan on the comms?
One thing I'd never expect to see, Keith, is you being an influencer. Well done.
I've tried with you all my life, Rob, and failed, but there you go. Enough of that. Thank you very much. So we are asked to note the engagement and communications activity has been undertaken since the last board and last meeting. And thank you, Duncan and team, for continuing with that good work. Brings us to AOB, and I know David, Councillor Roby has something he wants to raise. David, over to you.
Yes, no, thank you, Chairman. This is the question of the Tilbury to Gravesend ferry. This is a passenger ferry that operates across the Thames. It's operated for some time. It's very well used. and it is operated with a small subsidy, a comparatively small subsidy from Kent County Council and until recently Thurrock Council of £200,000 a year, £100,000 each. I think Essex have taken over the £100,000 from Thurrock, but at KCC we're currently consulting as to whether we can afford to carry on paying the £100,000 because of all the other pressures the council's under. Obviously, I mean, it's a very desirable thing. I say it's well used, and it also is a sort of a passenger complement to the Viertel crossing that the Lower Thames crossing represents, which doesn't actually have much of a public transport provision in it. What I'm asking really is there any way we can find the comparatively small amount of money necessary? Haruna Chucky, our highways director, has written to Matthew Palmer, the person I think at National Highways in charge of the Lower Thames crossing. But I mean, it seems so ridiculous that given the scale of that project in particular, and indeed, you know, general expenditure, well, generally, that for such a small amount of money, we can't keep something going that's, I think, is obviously desirable in every way. Apparently, it's also likely to be a factor in attracting labour to come across the river to actually work on the actual construction of the crossing. So,
thank you. I'm not sure where we, as a subnational transport board, can go with it, but I'll come to officers in a minute. We all know we are having to cut back on bus subsidies and all sorts of subsidies across the piece. So, Rupert, do you want to help us out here? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we recognised the value of that ferry service in the strategic investment plan, and you know, we did flag that in the medium term, you know, that is an area that we would want to work with and support enhancement to. I suppose since the development of the SIP, you know, in some respect, events have overtaken us. So, you know, many authorities are looking at things like subsidies as part of the wider budget pressures. I mean, certainly, Councillor Raby, we could have a conversation with the DFT and convene that for you. I don't think there is 100,000 from the Transport South East budgets that would be able to support you, but we'd be really happy to work with your officer team to see if we can engage the DFT in the, you know, recognising the value of this and seeing if there's anything we can do in that respect. It might be something that engagement with the DFT's local transport teams, where sort of bus provision sits. I mean, albeit it's on water, but it's, you know, the principle of it is similar. And we'd be very happy to do that. Please don't think that I'm suggesting there's an easy answer to all this, because the financial pressures are everywhere. It just seems, it's like many of these things, it seems like an absolute no-brainer. But no, I'll take that suggestion away and I'll go back to officers and see what we can do.
And we can open it up here. I mean, there may be other people that have found other innovative ways of funding these things. So if there's any other good advice around, then let's share it. That would be really helpful as well. Rob?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's good advice to share, but I think we've got to make sure there's another issue that we have sort of parity and consistency from what we're saying and doing, because we've got several ferries, we've had a similar issue. And David, if I may, this comes back to really discussion with local MPs. You're in the same position as us, where we're having to look at what is the bare legal, I suppose, minimum, and lots of these sort of things. I'm by all means, I think it's, you know, okay to raise it here, but I think whatever we do, we've got to make sure that's consistent across all the partner authorities. That would be my only concern. I'd very much advocate, you know, speaking to your local MPs, and I'm sure you have, but that's what, you know, that's what we've been doing. And we've had to look at whether we can continue to support our ferries, and indeed, we've already stopped one of them already. So it's just that consistency, Keith, I would say. That's all.
Yeah. But it's the right thing to do to bring it here. We'll get as much advice as we can. So thanks for that, David. But if there's anything else we can do, we will. But as Rob says, it's got to be recognised that we've got 16 transport bodies here. Not all of them have got ferries, thankfully. We have in East Sussex one, but is that helpful, or is there anything more you think we can do?
No, I think what Councillor Humby says is right. I mean, I think I'm a great advocate of trying to put this strong arm on government in whatever way we can, and the MPs are a good channel. But I absolutely agree with that. I think we could do more in Kent, to be honest, but we're doing our best. But I agree with the point very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there any other business that anyone wants to raise? No? Well, thank you all again for another really useful meeting. And next meeting is on Monday, the 13th of May, and that again will be virtual, so on Teams between 9 and 12 o'clock. So if that nothing else that anyone wants to raise, thank you all again, and look forward to catching up with many of you soon.